So, I want to thank Cedar Creek for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'll be talking about something that's really, really important to me and something that I think is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And if I can see this happen in my career, I will die happy. So, I want to start off by talking about a little bit about me and why I'm here. So, and to thank you all for being here on your free day of the year, right? It's leap year day. So thank you for spending it with us and me, and thank you for caring enough to come out on a Saturday in your busy lives to come out and hear about how to get engaged. So this is actually a picture of me out at the ocean. I grew up in Massachusetts and spent a lot of time out at the ocean with my grandparents and looking at snails and hermit crabs. And I spent a lot of time in the woods when I was a kid, and spent a lot of time playing in the pond across the street from my house, looking for frogs and tadpoles and bugs and critters. And if I wasn't outside getting dirty, I was probably sleeping or stuck in school. And so for me personally, the work that I do is very personal. It is, it's who I am. It's what I really care about, what I'm passionate about. And for me, going out into the nature and going out into the wild is really where I feel more connected to the world. It's where I feel I can find peace. And so the work that I do, so I work for the Wildlife Division of the Department of Natural Resources, and the work that I do is really personal to me. And for many of us that work in this field, it's really personal because it's our core values surround it. So for me, I grew up playing in the woods, and so that's why I'm here. And I imagine that many of you are here as well because you care about nature, you care about the environment, and making sure that it sticks around for future generations is really important. So right now, we have a lot of things. The world is really complicated these days, and we have a lot of a lot happens in the world today. We heard from Sandy and Jenny this morning. There's lots of pollution issues that continue to pop up that affect human health. And I think of wildlife as one really good kind of indicator that something's going wrong in the environment. And so, America's wildlife are at risk. And right now, about a third of the species that we have in the United States are at risk of extinction. There's been quite a few studies over the last couple of years that have shown some serious declines in wildlife. There's a recent study in Science that came out at the end of last year that showed that 1 in 4 birds over the last 50 years have vanished. And we have more and more rare species, species that are becoming listed as endangered because things aren't quite right in our environment. And the same is true for Michigan. So in Michigan, we have 277 plants and 119 animals that are on our threatened and endangered species list. We're working on updating that right now. We're working with experts on different species and different wildlife, bugs and fish and mussels and birds, and looking at the data that we have to look to see what species should be added to that list. And every time we've added species to the endangered species list in Michigan, it has increased. Every so often we do get to take things off, but it always increases. And we expect the same this time around. So I wanted to talk to you about I wanted to show you a few of the species, a few of the wildlife and the animals that are on our endangered species list that really are really in Michigan, that are really about like the fabric that we have in Michigan. Michigan is a beautiful state. We have an amazing amount of natural area, and we have a really amazing array of animals that live in the state. So Powesheik skipperling is the cutest dang butterfly. So there are only 6 of them left on the planet right now, and 4 of them are in Michigan. And so Michigan has a responsibility. I think we have a responsibility to make sure they stick around. Now, I'll also say the pouchy skipperlings are dependent on a groundwater-fed wetland. So when we talk about water quality and we talk about groundwater quality, wetlands, these guys rely on groundwater. So they're relying on things that we also rely on. And right now it's really unclear why these guys have declined. We've seen a 90% decline in the last 20 years in their populations. There's some potential groundwater quality issues, there's potential pesticide issues, climate change could be at play, but we're still trying to figure out what's going on, and we're losing time. Lake Sturgeon, we only have 24 populations in Michigan. They are the coolest dang fish. If you've ever seen them, I mean, there are prehistoric fish. They can get to be 6+ feet long. They're ginormous. They live for 50, 60, 80 years. And so they can really tell us a lot about the water quality in our rivers. They're state threatened. They were recently petitioned to be on the federal endangered species list. King rails are a really cool bird. They migrate, but they're found in Michigan as well. We only have about less than 10 breeding pairs in Michigan, and again, since the 1960s, they've had a 90% decline in their populations as well. These birds rely on wetlands. We've had a lot of loss of wetlands across the country. But this is what we could lose. Now, freshwater mussels, so if nobody knows about freshwater mussels, you should learn more. Because freshwater mussels are one of the coolest dang things ever. They look like a rock, but I would suggest go home, Google, and look at mussels and lures, L-U-R-E. There's some really cool videos that show how mussels reproduce. And what they need is they need fish hosts. They need fish to basically, they throw their eggs, they're basically their babies at fish, and they clamp onto fish gills. And then the fish swim around with them for a year or more, and then the mussels drop off into the stream bed and live. And the way they do this is that they have these lures that their mantles come out, and they look like fish. And they flick them and they move them so that fish come and try to eat them. Some, like snuff box, which is a super cool mussel, will actually capture the fish's head, and you can see them like wrestling with. So look up mussels, really cool videos online, fascinating. But they're also one of the most endangered groups of animals in the world because water quality is a real problem, right? So they are really telling us about the health of our lakes and our streams and our rivers, and they're also really long-lived. Some species can live over 50 years, and so they tell us about the long-term water quality of our lakes and rivers and streams. And recently, we're starting to get concerned about turtles. So I think probably a lot of us grew up checking out turtles, running into turtles. We see them on the side of the road. But we're having some problems with turtles right now, and we have 3 species of turtles that have been recently recommended and petitioned to be on the federal endangered species list. And those are spotted turtle, Blanding's turtle, and wood turtle, which is what this guy is. And so we're trying to better understand how they're doing. We need more information about them. We're trying to understand how they're doing and how we can help them to ensure that these really neat critters stick around. So that's really depressing. And those are just a couple. We have over 300 species on our threatened and endangered species list in Michigan. But there are things that we can do to work together, and when we work together, we can do really neat things, and we can be successful. So, went the wrong way. And the other cool thing is that in Michigan and all across the country, we all have plans that really outline how we can be successful and what we need to do to keep these critters around. So in Michigan, we have our Michigan Wildlife Action Plan. It is a plan that was developed with over 30 conservation partners across the state. We brought people together back in 2005 to develop the first plan, and in 2015 we updated it. And so this really focuses on the actions that we need to take to make sure that these animals and fish are still around for the next generation. It's really, if I put it in a nutshell, the Wildlife Action Plan is really about today's priorities for tomorrow's wildlife. And so Congress actually mandated these plans for all state agencies, for all states across the country back in 2000. And so this was the first time really that we were able to, when we knit all of these plans together, we have a network of conservation plans and a real plan of action for how to move forward to conserve and protect and manage our rare species across the country. This had never happened before. And so it's a really great opportunity to get engaged. Our Wildlife Action Plan is online, and it tells you about some of our focal species, so some of our key wildlife that we're really focusing on over the next 10 years, as well as their habitats. And it can give you more information about those really neat species, really neat wildlife, where they are, how they're doing, and what you can do to help. And the really cool part, though, is that when we pull together and we work together and we have resources, we can be really successful. So the Kirtland's warbler was one of the first species. It was on the first Federal Endangered Species Act list. And last year, we were able to remove that from the Federal Endangered Species list. They're doing really well. We've had multiple conservation partners in the state because for Michigan, they were the only place that they bred was in Michigan. So Kirtland warbler breed in Michigan, and then they're snowbirds. So then they fly down and live in the Bahamas and hang out in the winter and then come back up. And we, with targeted efforts, with concerted efforts, with partnerships, these birds have come back. They're doing great, they're really strong, and they were taking off the list. So when we work together, we can do great things. However, the funding that we have for conservation is not enough. So currently, for proactive conservation, we have less than 5% of what is necessary. So in Michigan, we get about $1.3 million every year for conservation efforts that are focused on rare species. And it's not enough for 300 and something species, right? So it's not enough for us to take proactive measures. What we can use that funding for is to be reactive. And we don't want to be reactive. It's more costly and it's more difficult to bring things back from the brink. So there's a new bill out, new legislation that's being moved through the House in DC called Recovering America's Wildlife Act. Now this bill is really about proactive conservation and in ensuring that that we're investing in our wildlife and our fish and our habitats and our ecosystems and making sure that they're healthy and thriving. Representative Dingell on the left there and Representative Fortenberry, he's from Nebraska, Mrs. Dingell is from Michigan, are the leads for the bill. And they've really been, Mrs. Dingell has really played a huge leadership role in moving this forward and trying to make sure that we are looking towards the future and how we keep our wildlife healthy and our land and waters healthy. And this is a big piece of it. So when the bill was first introduced, we had 31 original co-sponsors, but the momentum continues. Right now we have 174 co-sponsors. And this picture was actually taken at a press event the day that it was introduced. And so, you know, Michigan and Mrs. Dingle is really working hard to ensure that when hopefully my kids are around, that the wildlife that I get to see, they still get to see. And that the habitats and the lands and the waters that they get to see are healthier than when I left. So Recovering America's Wildlife Act is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And its goal is really to help prevent extinctions and to keep fish and wildlife off the endangered species list, to be proactive and not wait until things get on the emergency room. You know, getting into the emergency room, everything's going to be way more expensive than if we're taking care of ourselves from the get-go. And so this funding is really about taking care of things now so we don't have to go to extreme measures in the future or to lose things in the future. So the legislation would bring $1.3 billion to state fish and wildlife agencies and $97.5 million to tribal nations for the conservation of fish and wildlife. And again, I kind of want to reiterate that when we look to conserve fish and wildlife, they're really indicators of the health of our lands and waters. And when we work towards them and we work towards ensuring that these critters are still around, we're making sure that the lands and waters are also healthy for us. They're really great indicators, so if we're starting to lose species, something's wrong. You know, again, like I said, mussels are a really great indicator of water quality, and when we start to lose mussels, when we start to lose different types of mussels or numbers of mussels, we know something's wrong with the system. So what this bill would mean, and what it would mean for Michigan, I should say, is it would mean $37 million per year that would come to Michigan. So $28 million of it would be federal, and then $9 million would be match. So again, we get $1.3 million every year to focus on rare species. That's a drop in the bucket when you think about what it takes to protect land, to manage invasive species, to help restore osprey. So osprey are a really great example of where we've been successful. So in the 70s and 80s, osprey weren't doing well. They were really declining, they were really having problems, and we've been able to reintroduce them, and they're doing great down south now. You can see them, you see them all over. Bald eagle is another perfect example, right? When did you see bald eagles? Growing up. I see them all the time here. I'm from Lansing. They nest in Lansing. So when we put dedicated effort and we work together, we can be very successful and have these this is one of my favorite pictures because they're so funny. We can have these really neat wildlife for us to see and for us to share with people and to share with our kids and our grandkids. And then we also get that habitat behind them, right? In order for them to be there, we need their habitat. So then we also have these beautiful places for us to enjoy, to hike in, to kayak in, to fish in, to hunt in. They need habitat. They need lands and waters that are healthy, and so do we. So I just wanted to kind of show you that the legislation is very bipartisan. So it got passed. We had a really exciting kind of big step for the legislation, and in early December, it passed out of the House Natural Resources Committee, and we had, so on the left-hand side are the Democrats, on the right-hand side are the Republicans, and it passed out of the House with 26 yeses, 6 noes, and more Republicans voted for it than didn't. So it is a bipartisan legislation. Healthy lands and waters is a bipartisan issue. It's really about how do we all have great places to live and play. So the next steps for the legislation are we're continuing to gather co-sponsors, and we're pushing for a vote on the House and then eventually an introduction to the Senate. So there's lots of steps that are going to have to happen, and a unified approach has to continue to happen. And, you know, I kind of want to reiterate what Jenny said again is, it's important to talk to our legislators about what's important to us so that they know how their constituents want them to vote. And I just want to say that, you know, from where I sit, we really need the funding to ensure that these unique animals in these natural spaces and these lands and waters are healthy and thriving. And so we really need to work together to bring funding to the table so that we all can work together to do great things. So what can you do to help? So you can start off by learning about Recovering America's Wildlife Act. You can Google it. You can Google HR 3742. You can also go to our website for the Wildlife Action Plan, and that'll give you a bit more information about the plan. It also talks about the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. There's a video there from our director about it. Congress.gov, you can follow the legislation if you'd like. National Wildlife Federation and the Alliance for America's Wildlife are also some websites you can go, and there's National Wildlife Federation has been a real supporter and advocate for this, and they've put out a lot of information about it. So there's lots of information you can go and learn about and figure out how to get engaged. The other thing you can do is to thank our current co-sponsors. So I want to make sure I get this number right. 10 out of our 13 representatives have co-sponsored the bill. So Michigan's representatives are supporting wildlife conservation. They're supporting healthy lands and waters. And so if you get a chance, thank them. You know, if this is an important thing for you, thank your legislators that they're voting the way you want them to vote. And thank Mrs. Dingle too, because again, she's been a real supporter and really has been pushing this through. And I want to kind of mention that this would be the first real investment in wildlife and fish conservation in a really long time. So the first big investment that came about was through the Pittman-Robertson Act, and that was in the 1930s. And that's where funding went to help conserve furred and feathered animals. And then in the 1950s, the Dingle-Johnson Act was passed, and that brought money for the conservation of fish. We haven't had a significant investment in our wildlife, in our natural areas, and our natural spaces since the 1950s. Things have changed, right? And the world has gotten complicated, and it's more complicated to continue to do the work that we have to do now as wildlife professionals and as folks that are engaged in conservation. It's a lot more complicated than it used to be. It takes more resources and it takes more partnerships. So here are the three folks that haven't co-sponsored the bill yet. There's an opportunity to talk to your representatives if it's important to you. Talk to them about why. If you need any information, I'd be happy to provide you information. I've got some handouts over there. Tell you a little bit about what the Recovering America's Wildlife Act is, and then on the back side of it talks about what we would do with it in Michigan. And again, you can go to the Wildlife Action Plan, point them to that. We have a plan. We have a plan for moving forward. We have identified actions for what we need to do to conserve these animals and fish and wildlife and these habitats. And we also have existing partnerships. So Pierce Cedar Creek was at the table when we developed the Wildlife Action Plan. And so we have a lot of partners and a network already connected that are ready and are already doing great work. And if we could provide additional resources for them, they could do some amazing work. The other things that you can do is there's a sign-on letter. You can go to, again, the National Wildlife Federation, the Alliance for America's Wildlife, have sign-on letters, so you can sign on for you or your organization or organizations that you work with to say that you support this legislation. Talk it up. Share it on social media. hashtag recover wildlife, right? Like there's a website, there's a Facebook page for it, so if you want to get updates, but share it, talk to people about it. Because I know it's hard to keep all of the news that's happening to keep up with everything. But if a close friend of mine is talking to me about a new legislation or something that's important to them, I'm more likely to pay more attention to that. So think about that. The other thing I want to put a plug in here for is get involved. So get involved with your local nature center or your local land conservancy or your local watershed group. Like I said, the Department of Natural Resources, we work with a lot of land conservancies in this area. We work with Cedar Creek all the time. We work with Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy all the time. We work with a lot of different land conservancies and groups, and they do great conservation work for rare species. And without them, we wouldn't have these rare species still on the landscape. Because some of our rare species aren't found on state lands at all. They're on private lands. They're on our land conservancy lands, honestly. And they're doing great work to both protect those lands and to help make them healthier and thriving. And so the work that they do is really important to the conservation of all of our wildlife and all of our lands where we can enjoy and feel nature and be a part of it and feel connected. So I started with a picture of me. I'm going to end with a picture of my kid. This is one of my favorite pictures of my kid. He's 13 now. I think we were camping and he was running around chasing frogs, toads actually. And so my hope is that I want my kids to be still running around, catching toads, playing with frogs, looking at cool creatures, watching an eagle fly by, watching an osprey fly by. Being out in nature and actually just spending time in the woods, spending time in a field with lots of wildflowers and pollinators. I want him to be in a healthy environment with healthy lands and waters where he can see some really neat things. So for me personally, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, this Recovering America's Wildlife Act. It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I really urge you, and I hope that you'll think about supporting it because it's important for all of us. And it's important for our kids. Thank you. And I get to leave the picture up because he's so dang cute. He saw me working on it. He's like, why is that picture up? And I'm like, because it's cute. Oh, and I have one quick thing to say. So I have this little flyer to remind me. So again, when we put money and effort and resources towards things, we do great work. So there's the America's Birds in Crisis. It's a good thing to check out. But there's lots of down arrows, lots of things get going down. But where we put funding, they've gone up. Waterfowl have gone up because that's where we have funding. Raptors have gone up because we put effort there. So when we put effort places, we do good things. So this is America's Birds in Crisis. So it's a really neat publication you can check online. Okay, let's see. What would the increased funding in Michigan go to? Yeah, so it would go. So would it go? It would go to education. It could go to buying land. It would go to research. It would go to surveys and monitoring. It might go to species propagation, like for lake sturgeon. We raise lake sturgeon. We get them to a size where they're going to be, they're more likely to make it in the wild instead of getting eaten by everything else, right? And we put them in. More propagation for some of our butterflies. So we do some propagation efforts for Mitchell Cedar butterfly. We're trying to do propagation efforts right now for power sheep butterfly. So there's a lot of things, and pretty much what's in the Wildlife Action Plan, that's where the funding would go to. That funding would be directed there. The funding can also be used for outreach and education and wildlife recreation. So, all right, let's see. I gotta get my glasses out here.
I can read it to you.
Yeah.
To create a healthier environment and to save species, a lot more species, something you considered, using a resilience approach versus a
Command and control.
top-down approach.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. So we talk about this a lot at work. Coarse filter, fine filter, that's what we call it, right? And we have to do both. So we really have to work on looking at ecosystem functions and ensuring that all the system is working and that things, that the whole system is working. And so we need to look at, how do we make these habitats healthy? But for some species, that's not enough, and we really need to focus on that species, and we really need to be, roll up our sleeves and just focus there. And so it's both.
There's a couple on how does climate change affect your approach to conservation?
Woo! Yeah. A lot. And so we talk about it a lot. My neighbor in the cube next to me is our climate adaptation specialist. And so we talk about it a lot. It's in the Wildlife Action Plan. We talk about which fish and wildlife are more likely to decline or become stable or potentially increase, which habitats are likely to be lost or be stable or to increase. And so we think about that a lot in terms of what we do, and we really try hard to do is think about what are the climate smart actions we can do. That regardless of, we don't fully know what's going to happen. There's the model says many different things, and especially in Michigan. Michigan's a funny place because of the lakes and the lake effect that we get. So what we try hard to do is to think about different scenarios and then look for an action that will be beneficial in multiple scenarios. So we do think about that a lot. And a lot of it is thinking about intact landscapes, ensuring, having less fragmentation, ensuring corridors, looking at functions, things like that.
So this one's similar. Since raccoons and opossums are top predators of birds' eggs, is anything being done to encourage hunting trapping to keep these predators in check?
Yeah. So opossums are also really good at eating ticks. So that's, so there's goods and bads. Now I will say raccoons are problematic not just for birds, but also for turtles. Raccoons really like to wait. They're smart, right? And they'll wait and they'll find where turtles are nesting and they'll just hang out and wait until they hatch. So we have talked about how do we manage that. We do have trapping. Trapping is a viable both kind of opportunity in the state. And so we have talked about doing some experiments to look if we could work with trappers in certain areas where we know that we have some turtles that are having trouble kind of finishing their reproductive cycle. So we have talked about it.
There's one similar probably to that. When should I rake my leaves this spring? I think there was a question maybe in terms of a particular animal. Did you talk about leaves?
Yeah.
Okay, I heard, and I know we're not supposed to, but I heard that they've asked that we don't rake our leaves for the bugs and the things that grow under them and so forth. We're in a wooded area and we have lots of terraces and stones. So this year we did not rake our leaves at all. So when should I remove them? Because we do have a lot of toads. We have a lot of things that live in these rocks. Late summer?
Well, I try to find ways not to do much maintenance of things if we can help it, right? Okay. Springtime you might have some things using it, so you might want to wait until it starts to dry out a little bit and then you can pull them off. Yeah.
Okay. How do you and other government officials you work with feel about an underlying rights of nature paradigm with legislation to support that?
I don't, I'm not sure I understand the question.
You gave that one to me.
Yeah.
There is a movement to give nature self-rights.
Oh.
We have, right.
Yeah.
Woodlands have rights themselves, so it is just about cleaning up what humans have done afterwards and the whack-a-mole idea. But
hitting the big problem, of course, like with regard to changing the way we think about it. I
Yeah,
wonder if that
that'd be great.
Yeah. But it also is it is a movement that has some.
Which is awesome, you know, and we talk a lot, the folks that I work with, we talk a lot about different values of wildlife and talk about how do we work with people and talk about wildlife and fish in lots of different values because, you know, from the department's standpoint, you know, we work with a lot of hunting groups. But we also want to work with tribes that look at wildlife in a very, very different way. And we want to work with other folks that have different value sets for wildlife. And managing all of those value sets is complicated and exciting to me. So yes, let's do more of that.
Toledo has passed rights for Lake Erie.
Oh,
That's an example.
that's a good one.
Of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then you have.
So I don't hear it where I sit.
You don't. Okay. That was my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, why don't we end on this one, because I like ending on success. Do you have more success stories, and where are they posted?
Yeah, so we have some successes, I think, on our website. You know, we've talked about that. So trumpeter swan is another great success story. You know, when the non-game program, so non-game means not hunted. When the non-game program started, we had the license plate. So it used to be the loon license plate, and now it's the elk license plate. We worked and did a lot of kind of talking about that, and we've not done as good of a job lately. But trumpeter swans are a great one. Osprey, peregrine falcons. It's been a lot of birds. So it's been a lot of bird successes because we've had some funding that we can put towards birds. But others, it's been less because we've had less. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much.